good people? What's good? Welcome to Ichabod. I am your host, Be Good. It's been a minute, and I'm glad to be back with you guys tonight. Welcome to the show. Come on into the chat. I see a few folks in the house already. Greetings. What's up, Mark Smith? What's up, Michael Apple? Truxton, what's going on? See y'all, folks. Henry Mars, good to see y'all. I gotta forgive me. I lost my voice last week. I had a cold that snuck up on me out of nowhere because I've been traveling. I hit about 5 different states, going from Houston to Denver and upstate New York and Alabama. Somewhere in all that traveling, I caught a cold and was resting my voice. And then I had one of my Facebook followers, a former cross movement fan, probably still a fan of cross movement, but former me, since I'm not a Christian anymore. This brother flew in from Florida a couple of days after I had already gotten sick and was getting over it. And I forgot to tell him, like, yo, you might want to hold up. So he came into town. I didn't want it to be a wasted trip for him. So I was like, okay, let me still get together with this guy. So we got together last week, Thursday. Then I said, hey man, I'm not well. And so he was in town for a few days. So it was him and his whole family. He brought his family up to Philly and all that. And then we got together again on Saturday. So outside of Thursday when he was here and Saturday when I got together with him again, outside of those 2 days, I've spoken to no one since last Wednesday because I was coughing and lost my voice. And Saturday I got together with him for the second time. And then I didn't speak all day Sunday. I didn't speak all day Monday. So now here we are at the end of Tuesday. And I had this program scheduled. So, and then I got to give 2 talks tomorrow. So I'm going to try to see how far I can go on my limited capability right here. So either way, what's going on, y'all? Glad you're here. Welcome to Ichabod. And if I haven't shouted your name out, then this is for you. If you're a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for signing up, for rocking with the channel. And I do have to say, I spent most of the day with a pit in my stomach because you all know what's happening in our country right now. If you're in the United States, our president literally told the commanders of America's military that they're going to be used in wars against the enemy within in American cities. And so I don't know how to feel, y'all. I don't know how y'all feel. He's already put out things saying that his administration is going to be cracking down on anti-Christian things. If you're an anti-Christian family or morality or values, whatever it is. Man, look, I see dark days ahead, and I don't know what to do or say other than to try to appeal to people that if part of the reason why you're allowing this to happen is because you think that this is the Christian thing or this is God's thing, God's way, this is God's man, and we're going to be a Christian nation. And if any of that is in your why you're okay with this, first, you're being un-American to allow a president to talk this way, let alone threaten to do these things. But then 2, I want to know from the Christian, and maybe I'll ask the Christian that we're about to bring on. We asked him last time, and he wasn't feeling too much of what was going on in his home city. But we'll see. How Christian is, though? It's not American what's happening right now. Is it Christian? And so with that being the case, let's bring our guest in. Please welcome back to Ichabod, Alexander Twyman. What's going on, fam?
What's good, man? How's everything?
Well, like I said, aside from the coughing and trying to fight for my voice, all
Yeah,
is well. I got outside my house today. I went to the market and just saw people like, okay, life is still going on. If you spend a lot of time in the house on your phone or on the internet, hearing all the talk, it can really be hard to feel like things are well in light of what we're facing as a nation. But I asked you last time because you're down in DC, right?
that's right. Yeah.
So, how do you feel about what's going on as a Christian? Because part of what's happening is being done in the name of Christian nationalism. Um, how do you feel about what's going on?
Yeah. So I'm gonna just be upfront and honest, man. For the longest time, man, I I stopped and kind of diminished my watching of the news just because
Mm,
of our president. And so I may not know all the details, but my understanding is that he's trying to create some sort of Christian nationalist push to kind of enforce Christianity and fight and push away anti-theistic ideals. To me, man, I think it's terrible. I think as a human, nobody should be forced to believe or think or do. That's the
mm,
first thing. Second, as a Christian, this is it's not as bad, but this is sounding crusade-ish. And I'm like,
mm,
you can't force people to do anything. You can't push away people from their ideals. It doesn't work to force people to. You can't force people into belief.
mm,
Um, Belief is something that must be freely walked into, and so I think it's evil. I dare I
mm,
say it's evil. I think that we proclaim the gospel, we proclaim the truth, and God is the one, from a Christian perspective, God does the drawing. God draws his people to himself. His sheep will
mm,
hear his voice. So any Christian that stands on top of that walks right
mm,
behind Jesus' words and say, you know what, I'm gonna fight against anti-Christian ideals to the point where, militarize, or we're gonna really, really, enforce this thing. I pause at that because I'm like, you,
mm.
you you don't need to assist God in this. God got it.
Well, I hear what
So
you're saying. It makes me wonder, maybe if anybody in the chat, if you've done the reading, I wonder what Christians in the fourth century thought when Constantine gave the stamp of approval, and then decades later, when I think it was Theodosius or whoever was the emperor at that time, who made Christianity the official religion of Rome by force. I wonder if Christians in that day celebrated. I would imagine that many of them probably thought this might be the coming of the kingdom.
it's possible. I'm not a history guy, but I just know I'm never I don't see anywhere in the scriptures where it says enforce this.
Hmm,
And so I just think it's opposite of what the Bible proclaims.
gotcha. Okay. Forgive me for
I
the
could say
coughing.
much more about our president, but I'll leave it at
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
I look, bro. I appreciate any believer who's willing to say this is not. Um, what did Jesus say? Right, my kingdom is not of this world. If it was, my servants would fight.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you see what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Um,
It's still I still have that duality though, because I still
mhm,
follow Romans 13 that calls me to
mhm,
submit to governing authorities. Um, but I am not in agreement at all.
mm. Yeah, I feel you. So tonight, so talk about the kingdom coming. We're going to be talking about two passages of scripture that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
But one of the things I said I would also do is these are two passages that stand out to me. We're going to spend some time talking about those. I would love to see what you have to say about them. And then I want to save some time for you to flip it and ask me any questions that you have of my worldview or my travels or whatever, just to give you a chance to to flip the table a little
Sure.
bit.
Sure.
Um, and as always, if my mic starts sounding crazy, let me know ASAP so I can switch it up. and do what I
Gotcha.
need to do over here. Can we start in Romans? Romans, I told you Romans chapter 10,
Yeah, Romans 10.
but if you don't mind, can I start in Romans 9 I want to do Romans 9 and Hosea as an example of what I think is happening in Romans 10. Is that cool?
Okay.
So, all right. Romans 9. Oh, okay. So let me just give you my this is my philosophy. This is my claim. My claim is that Paul is, I'm going to say, misusing the Old Testament. Paul's going to be going to the Old Testament and saying things about the Old Testament that the Old Testament is not saying about itself. And a few weeks ago, I posted on Facebook that Christianity or Christians owe Jews an apology because I feel like Christians, starting with Paul, make mincemeat of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew Bible, in terms of what the things that actually are prophecies. Christians have a weird way of saying that they were fulfilled. And then there are other things that were not even prophecies, and Christians take and make those things prophecies. And if you look at that long enough, I think it's difficult to walk away saying, Paul says the Bereans went home and searched the scriptures to see if the things Paul said was true.
Right.
I think if you really do that, you can't walk away thinking the things Paul said was true. If you search the Old Testament and look at what Paul says, I think you walk away with two different understandings. And so I just want to, I want to show a case of that in Romans 9 and Hosea.
Okay.
And then go to the passages in Romans 10 and see if I can make that connection.
Okay.
So starting in Romans 9, let's say verses 22 to 26. Romans chapter 9, verses 22 to 26. And in Romans 9, what Paul...
Let me read that for the sake of your voice.
I would appreciate it. Yes, sir. Yep, go ahead.
All right, so for the listener audience, turn with me. Let me put my pass hat on. If you have your Bibles, your devices, turn with me to Romans chapter 9, verse 22. Say amen when you get there. What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles.
Pause.
As indeed he says in Hosea, those who are not my people, I will call my people, and her who was not beloved, I will call beloved. You said the 26?
No, that's cool.
Okay.
That's cool right there.
All right.
So what Paul is doing here, right? Tell me if you disagree. Paul is making a case for why God grafting the Gentiles into this Jewish religion is not unheard of. The Gentiles were always going to be part of the plan. You think he's doing anything different there than that?
I think, and what he's doing in Romans 9 and Romans 10 is partly that, where he's identifying that the Gentiles will always, they're not plan B, they were always going to be a part of the fold. But I also think what he's doing as he reaches back and references Old Testament passages is, for the Jewish mind, the listener that's hearing this, he's connecting Old Testament to New Testament to show that this is God is doing this in the same way that he might have done it back then. So when he says, those who were not my people, I now will call my people, it is because Paul he's called to the Gentiles. So he's telling them that, hey, this is God calling his people that are not his people. It's not the Jew. It was to the Jews first, but y'all have rejected it. And so now, as Hosea said, he is now bringing about his people through the Gentiles.
All right. I'm with you 92.2%.
Okay.
All right. But now let's turn to Isaiah and see what Isaiah is actually saying. So we can
Hosea.
go to Isaiah. I'm sorry, yeah, Hosea chapter 1.
Okay.
And so everybody knows the story of Hosea, right? Prophet. God goes and tells him to marry a prostitute,
Mm-hmm.
marry somebody who is habitually going to be unfaithful, because that's like Israel. Israel's unfaithful to me.
Right.
And then God tells Hosea, you start having children, name your first child No Mercy, because I'm not going to have mercy on Israel anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All right. True?
I'm with you.
Okay. The second child, he says, hold on, let me go to Isaiah. Hosea. I keep saying Isaiah.
Yeah, that's
Hosea.
verse 6. Call her name No Mercy.
Yep. Did I skip a child? Yeah, the first child was Jezreel.
So we
Yeah,
got
verse 6 is
Jezreel, No Mercy.
Jezreel. Second child is No Mercy. Now, what does he tell him to call the third child? You got to go down to verse 9 for that.
Okay. And the Lord said, call his name not my people, for you are not my people, and I am not your God.
Who's that verse about? Verse 9.
Well, I think he's talking to Hosea, and that was supposed to be his proclamation to the Israelites.
Right. So he's telling Isaiah, call this child not my people, because I'm going to disinherit, I'm going to disown Israel. Right.
Okay.
Now, go down to verse 10 and just read verse 10.
Okay. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, it shall be said to them, children of the living God.
Okay. You can pause right there.
Okay.
What's happening there?
He says, let me see, yet the number of children of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea. He's telling them that that even though they were said to be, you're not my people, it'll be said to them, you're children of the living God.
So do you see any issue there with what's happening in Romans 9?
No.
Okay, let me ask you this. Are there any Gentiles in in Hosea chapter 1, verse 10?
Do I think there are any? I don't think there are any Gentiles in this verse, no.
Right.
I think there were Gentiles during that time.
Oh, during that time for sure. But is he saying to the Gentiles in Hosea 1, you're not my people, but you're going to be my people? Is he saying that to the Gentiles in Hosea?
No, I think he's talking to the children of Israel. Yet the number of the children of Israel. He's talking to the children of Israel.
In Romans 9, who is Paul applying this verse to?
The Gentiles.
Okay. You don't see any discrepancy there?
No.
Okay.
I think that's consistent in the Old Testament. God has said, I'm gonna wipe you up. There's gonna be weeping and mourning, but he always keeps a remnant. he punishes greatly, dramatically even, but there's always a remnant left. He never wipes out his people. That was the promise to Abraham, and so there's always an endurance of the people of children of Israel. However, when we get to Romans and Paul is now sent to be a minister to the Gentiles, he's using this language to this Jewish audience to inform them that, hey, there's going to be these other people who were always supposed to be here. They're going to be grafted in. They're going to be joined together. And so I don't see the inconsistency. I just think that Paul is creatively, that's my word, is creatively explaining his ministry to the Gentiles.
So if you were a Jew in the first century, looking for a Messiah to come and deliver your people, not necessarily spiritually, the deliverance is, because in Isaiah, I think it's chapter 40, somewhere there, God tells um, Israel through Isaiah, you're going to pay for your sins like 2 times, like twofold. You're going to pay for your own sins through all you're going to go through as a nation.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have a savior come and die for you. You're going to pay for your own sins by going through this tumultuous time under all these different earthly leaders. That's in the Hebrew Bible. You're paying for your sins as a nation, being oppressed and being in exile and losing your land and losing the temple and all that. Then you get to the 1st century and you're a Jewish person. And the promise to the old prophets was God disowned you and called you not his people. But one day he's going to say, okay, enough of that. You've paid for your sins. Now you are my people again.
Well,
So here you are in
that's the kind of the arc of judgment and redemption. Even though God judges, he never leaves his people as orphans. He always okay.
So, but the promise is, and the expectation is, you're going to be his people again. He called you not his people. He's going to call you his people again. That's what you're looking forward to. If you're a 1st century Israelite, right?
Okay.
And then Paul comes and says, hey, remember that promise? The people that are not his people, Israel, he's going to make them his people again, Israel. And Paul says, oh, remember that promise to Hosea? That applies to the Gentiles. You don't think that that's any kind of like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, we're the ones who were disowned as God's people who are going to be made his people again. We're looking for that. You're telling me this Jesus is the Messiah to do that. And then the application of this verse that should usher us back into being the people of God. Now, Paul, you're telling me that applies not to us, but to the Gentiles?
Yeah, I mean, but there's hundreds of years between Hosea and Romans. And I think the Jews during that time understood that they were still God's people. I don't think that was lost on them. They didn't have a disdain for Hosea because it didn't apply to them. Because you got to get to the rest of Hosea as it speaks to the Israelites. But again, that's what I'm saying. The normal arc of the Old Testament is God sends a prophet to warn the people, turn and repent, turn and repent. They don't repent. God judges them, sends in the Assyrians or the Babylonians, and then there's lamenting and there's pain and there's anguish, but then he comes back and restores them again. And so I think when we get to Romans, Paul, again, he's opening with that his ministry is to the Gentiles, but it is not like he is pushing off the Jews at all. That's why we get to Romans 9 and 11, where it starts talking about this community. And so I think I don't see a discrepancy there. I just think that that's the normal arc of the Old Testament.
But the normal arc of the Old Testament is not the Gentiles are going to be receiving the fulfillment of the promises to Israel. Specifically, I disinherited you. You're not my people. I'm going to make you my people. Is the normal arc of the Old Testament to apply those kinds of passages to Gentiles.
Say that one more time.
So you're saying this is the normal arc, the ebb and flow of the Old Testament. And I'm saying as part of that ebb and flow, to take promises to Israel and apply them to Gentiles.
I don't think it's so. Again, when we get to Romans 10, he's talking to a Jewish audience that already has these scriptures as their foundation. They're already familiar with this. And so as he's explaining his ministry to the Gentiles and to the Jews, because he himself says, I wish that I would trust that all my brothers were saved. So it's not like he is pushing off the Jews or he is ignoring the Jews. He is incorporating the Gentiles. And so when you say, that's why I say he's also been creative in the way he expresses it, because he's saying, I will call those people who are not my people, my people. And so it doesn't, push away the Jews or ignores the Jews, it incorporates the Gentiles. And I think when he's saying that, he's changing the Israelite mind to not only think of themselves as the receiver of this promise, he's teaching the Israelites and the Gentiles to start thinking about themselves, who were not God's people, to be his people. And so while Hosea promises that, hey, this will be, you will be my people, again, I'm not going to leave you. He's going to restore them. The message to the Gentiles is, you're in this with the Israelites as well. Israelites, it's nothing special about you Israelites. You're not the chosen people, but you're not the only one who will receive of the promise.
So basically, you're saying, well, let me ask you. Let me not try to say it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that Paul is just making an allusion to an Old Testament passage because the language is useful? God takes those who are not his people and makes them his people. He did it with Israel, and he's going to do the same thing with the Gentiles.
I don't think it's an illusion. I think he's literally saying, see, the Israelites were not his people in one sense because of their rebellion, right? But then they became his people because he would eventually send the Savior. So, but the Gentiles were not his people because of they never received the oracles. They never were a part of God. They weren't God's chosen people. So he's using the language to apply to two different groups of people, but they apply differently. The Israelites were not his people because of sin. The Gentiles were not his people because they were not chosen. But they both.
So, do you think Hosea had that in mind when he received that? Or do you think God, the God character in Hosea, or Hosea as a character, had in mind? I don't mean that to be offensive. I'm just saying the God of the Bible.
It's funny, I know.
Do you think the God of the Bible in Hosea had in mind, I'm going to make them who are not my people, my people? In that passage, the Gentiles were in view.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
God exists outside of time, so he sees the end before the beginning, and I can go into that part, a piece of it. But I think Hosea is a specific point in time coming to a specific people. And so the language in Hosea is specific to the Israelites. When we get to Romans, it's broadened to include the Gentiles.
All right.
And I think God knew God chooses his people before the foundations of the world. So yes, I think in Hosea, he has Gentiles in mind as well. It's just not written to Hosea. Hosea is not writing and speaking to Gentiles.
Interesting. So anybody who's interested, and if you want to later on, you can go on and read Hosea chapter 2, because you see how graphic God gets with what he's going to do to make Israel not his people. In Hosea chapter 2, he personifies Israel as a young virgin who's dirty and filthy and uncovered and naked, and God comes and God's going to actually put Israel in that. He's going to disown them and leave them out there to their own devices. And then at the end of chapter 2, again, God makes the same promise that he makes at the end of chapter 1, but I'm going to one day clothe you and clean you back up and say to you who are not my people, my people. That's Hosea, I think 2, around verse 23. So what you see in Hosea chapter 1, you get a detailed description of that in Hosea chapter 2. Once again, it has absolutely nothing to do with Gentiles. But you're saying in God's eyes it did, and Paul in Romans 9, when he pulls this Hosea passage, Paul is proving that God had the Gentiles in mind, even though in Hosea, this was a purely Israel-centered verse.
Yeah, I think it's a type and shadow of what's to come.
Wait. Okay, so it's a type and shadow, a foreshadowing.
Yeah. Because again, like if you read Hosea 14, right, it's kind of this plea to return to the Lord. And he's like,
wait, Hosea what?
14. He's like, in verse 4, He's like, I will heal their apostasy. I will love them freely, for my anger has not turned from them. I will be like the dew to Israel. He shall blossom like the lily. He shall take the root of the trees of Lebanon. Pretty much in layman's English, it's he's not leaving. He's just not leaving them in judgment. He's telling them that he's going to redeem them eventually. Now, again, this is Old Testament. This is not the New Testament. It's not the New Covenant. And so what we see happening in Hosea, where it's kind of a question mark, like, will God heal these people? Will God save his people? Fast forward to Romans 9, God redeems all mankind.
Okay. So that will be, I would imagine when we get to Romans 10, your answers might be very similar, but let's see.
Okay.
So I told you I wanted to look at some of the Old Testament references in Romans chapter 10.
Yep.
If I can just start off by asking you, I think I know the Christian answer because I used to be one, but I'm curious to see what you say. Which is easier? Trying to obtain righteousness by the law or trying to obtain righteousness by faith?
I don't think you obtain righteousness. I think you're given, or God makes you righteous.
Right, but I'm just asking, which is easier to try to accomplish, to obtain righteousness by the law or to try to obtain it by faith?
So I'm struggling with the language, but I think I know what you mean.
So obtain, I mean, to end up being righteous via the law or to end up being righteous by faith, which is easier? Am I still not asking in a way that's easy to answer?
Forgive me for being nitpicky or
That's all good. Language matters.
Anal.
Language matters.
I think because God is the Redeemer and he does 100% of the work for salvation, I don't think we do anything to obtain righteousness. I think that's why the law is a schoolmaster that points us to Jesus. It's meant, if we try to accomplish the law, we're going to fail miserably. And it's just all it's going to do is highlight our sin. It's going to be the mirror that the Bible talks about. And so
I think you're answering my question.
Okay. Okay.
If I tried to become righteous by observing the law versus if I tried to be considered righteous in God's sight via faith, which would I be more successful in doing?
You will fail at both of them because, again, God gives you faith. Faith is a gift. We don't earn righteous. We don't become righteous in and of ourselves.
Okay. So obtaining righteousness via the law, is it possible or impossible?
Impossible.
Obtaining righteousness via faith, is it possible or impossible?
Because of the work of Jesus, and God, I think God gifts us with faith. So yes, it's possible.
So then this is a long way to get to the answer I was trying to get. It's possible to become righteous via faith. It's impossible to become righteous via the law.
Right. Except for Jesus. But Jesus didn't become righteous, so that's another thing. I'm just saying Jesus fulfilled the law.
Now, what you went to Galatians, right? From the law is a schoolmaster. And Romans is big on this idea of righteousness via faith versus righteousness via the law.
Right.
I'm curious, do you think that Paul disagrees with Jesus on that issue?
On what issues? Help me out.
On whether or not righteousness via the law is even possible.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think Paul necessarily speaks to the impossibility of it. I think when he says the law is a schoolmaster or is a mirror, or it points us to sin, I think he is showing our incapability to accomplish the law.
So he does speak to the impossibility of it if what you're saying is true.
But I'm saying, you asked me, does Paul agree with Jesus on this? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Oh, so if Paul, right, so Paul talks about the incapability of humans to obtain righteousness via the law. Does Jesus, you don't know if Jesus would agree with that? Does Jesus think it's possible to be righteous via the law?
I would assume. I mean, did Jesus speak on that? Did Jesus say that? I'm not sure.
All right, forget Jesus. Moses. Do you think Moses thinks it was possible?
To attain be righteous by the law.
Mm-hmm.
I think Moses gave the law. I don't know if it's I don't know what Moses thought about the law. I just know that when God gave the law, it was to show people that they are incapable, and that faith was always to be the point, because that's what Romans 4 talks about. It was Abraham's faith that was accounted to him to righteousness. So it wasn't the works of the law that brought about righteousness. And so I don't know if the prophets of old thought that this was the path to go.
Okay. So now here's what I'd like to press the point that I'm trying to make tonight.
Mm-hmm.
What you just said about Romans having this view of the law being being this impossible route to righteousness. That is a Pauline view. That
Mm-hmm.
is not a view that you would get from Moses at all. As a matter of fact. So in Romans 10, right?
Yep.
At the top of the chapter, let's start at verse 5. Would
Okay.
you mind reading verses 5 through 7?
Okay, give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Romans 10, verse 5 through 7, right?
Yep.
This is ESV. For Moses writes about the righteousness that is based on the law, that the person who does the commandments shall live by them. But the righteousness based on faith says, do not say in your heart who will ascend to heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead.
You can read one more.
But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith that we proclaim.
Okay. So here's my contention.
Mm-hmm.
Paul in those verses is butchering Moses from Deuteronomy chapter 30.
Why you say that?
Have you read Deuteronomy chapter 30?
Yeah.
Okay. So Paul says, he shouts out Moses. Moses writes about righteousness that's based on the law.
Yeah.
Seems like Moses thinks it's possible to obtain righteousness based on the law, that a person who does the commandments shall live by them. And now you might say as a Christian, if you could do them, you would live by them. If it was possible for a human being to not be sinful, then maybe the human being could live out the law and be considered righteous. But as a Christian, you would say it's impossible. But Moses didn't seem to think that, right? Moses seemed to think, no, this is how we get righteousness. We observe these laws.
Yeah, but what was the purpose for the law? Wasn't just a bunch of rules. It was also to separate them from the culture around them. The law was also a sanctification for the ancient Israelites. And so Deuteronomy chapter 30, I think is 12 through 14. Can I just read
Start
that?
at 11. Start at 11.
Start at 11, okay. It says, and the Lord said to me, arise, go on your journey at the head of the people, so that they may
Hold on, wait. What chapter you in?
I'm sorry, I'm in 10. My fault.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 30, verse 11.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Okay. For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will ascend to heaven for us and bring it to us, that we may hear and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so that you can do it.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Does Moses in this passage think that the law is impossible for a human being to live out? Is it too hard?
So I think we got to be specific. I don't think Moses thinks that it is impossible to live by the law. Now, the question is, can you live by the law perfectly? and I don't think that's possible.
No. I understand you don't think it's possible. Did Moses think it was possible?
Well, no, because they had sacrifices for forgiveness when they broke the law, and then Deuteronomy, he pronounces judgment in chapter 28 to say, hey,
The question
if
is
you,
not whether or not somebody could break it. The question is it too hard to live out?
I think it is because that's
No,
why
no, no.
that's why they had to keep sacrificing because they
Well,
kept failing.
did Moses think it was too difficult to do?
Again, that's what I'm trying to be specific. What do you
Mhm.
mean when you say to do the law? Are you saying live it out perfectly, or are you just saying obey it as best you can?
For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you.
Mm-hmm.
What is he saying there?
He's saying it's not too hard. It's not something that's in the heavens that you got to go grasp up. It's something that you can do. You can live within the law.
Verse 14, the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can do it. Does
Mhm.
Moses think it's impossible to live out the law?
Yeah. Again, so if we got to be specific to live it out. When you say to live out the law, I don't think Moses thinks it's impossible to live by God's commands. I think that's their call. That's their purpose for serving and serving God. They obey His commandments. I think the fact that they have to sacrifice and they have to make atonement every year, I think shows that in their mind they also knew that it's impossible to do this perfectly. We're going to continue to fail.
um, Having a scapegoat and having pigeons and having sacrifices for when I fail doesn't mean I have to fail, right?
No, doesn't mean you have to. You will, but
Yeah. So if he says, so is he lying when he says this is not too hard for you to do?
no, because I think when he's talking about keeping God's commandments, right? When you obey the voice, let me go back up to verse 9. The Lord your God will make you abundantly prosperous in all the work of your hand, and the fruit of your womb, and in the fruit of your cattle, and the fruit of your ground. For the Lord will again delight in prospering you, as he took delight in your fathers, when you obey the voice of your God to keep his commandments and his statutes that are written in this book of the law, when you turn to your God with all your heart and with all your soul. For this commandment I command you, there's not too hard. So I don't think it's impossible. I don't think Moses thinks that living by the law is impossible, because that was the kind of the mindset. It's burdensome. It's 613 statutes and 10 commandments, 613 laws. It was a burden, and Paul talks about that later. It was cumbersome, but Moses is teaching them that, hey, it's not beyond your reach to live for the Lord. But again, if your question is, can you live out the law perfectly? No, I don't think Moses was communicating that here. I think he was just saying you can obey God's voice. You can obey God.
I'm struggling with that. Okay. So he's saying it's not too difficult for you to do. You can do this,
Mm-hmm.
but he's not saying like it's impossible. I don't see how you're like, he definitely is not saying the thing that Paul is saying. Matter of fact, one
Yeah.
of the
So
things that's
let's keep
interesting.
reading. Let's keep reading. Verse 15. It says, "See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil." So there's a duality there. It isn't
Mhm.
just you can do this. It's all going to be gravy. There's death and evil on the other side of this. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, if you obey the commandments by
Is
loving the
that
Lord
if
your
a
God,
trick?
hmm?
Like if the if is not even possible, that's like if I were to tell you, you don't even know where I live right now, But if you can make it here by what time is it now? It's 9:17 on the East Coast.
Right.
You don't even know where I live. We know just geographically you're at least 2 hours away from me. But if I said to you, if you can make it here by 10 p.m., I'll give you all the money in my bank account. Is that a real offer to you? If you don't even know where I live and it's geographically, physically impossible for you to make it here by 10, is that a real offer?
No, that's unrealistic.
Right. So if God says here, the verse that you just read,
Mm-hmm.
I set before you life and death. If you choose, but if you don't have the ability to actually live out this law, is that a real offer?
He's saying no. He's not saying you don't have the ability to live. See, that's what I'm saying. We got to define. When
No,
you say
God's
live out
not
the
saying
law,
it.
you mean live it out perfectly.
So what's the difference? Like as a Christian who often evangelizes, one of the things that you stress to unbelievers is living out the law perfectly. If you don't live out the law perfectly, you've proven that you're a sinner. You've proven that you cannot merit salvation. You're not righteous enough.
Right.
There is no live out the law some and then live it out perfectly. If you don't live it out perfectly, you haven't lived it out.
Right. If you want sin, you're guilty of the whole law.
Right. So why are you making this distinction between God's not saying if you live it out perfectly, he's just saying, oh, if you kind of live it out some.
Because you can't just take, because I'm not taking Deuteronomy 30 by itself. There's a whole context behind it where there's sacrificial offerings for sin. There's the scapegoats. There's the pigeons and all that, where it's already in their mind to that their sin, that they fall away. Deuteronomy 28, he gives them blessings and curses based on how you live. There's always a duality of, if you do right, God will bless you. If you do wrong, God will punish you.
How right do they have to do to get the blessings? Will one sin mess up the blessings?
I think, well, what do you mean by the blessings?
You said if you do right, you'll get these blessings. And I'm saying, how right do you have to be to get the blessings? How right, like what's the quota for I was right, but I didn't do X. Now I don't get the blessings.
Perfection.
Okay, so that's why I keep going back to that point. You keep making it seem like God's not trying to get them to some perfect status.
No,
but then when I press you, you keep.
So that's why I was brought up earlier, Romans 4, where he's talking about Abraham, and it wasn't his work of the law that made him righteous. It was his faith that was accounted for righteous. So faith was also something that was necessary in the Old Testament. It wasn't the works of the law that justified.
Well, I disagree with that even interpretation. I think Paul is bugging even with that. I don't know if you saw the episode I did with I forgot who it was, but I think Paul's misreading Genesis 15 when he says God counted Abram as righteous. I think Abram is counting God as righteous in that passage. That's a whole other Romans misuse of the Old Testament that I think is there. But you see a trend. You see Paul setting this trend of it's got to be by faith. That's how you're going to get this righteousness.
Right.
And through the law, it's impossible, even though in the Old Testament, no one said it was impossible in the Old Testament. Matter of fact, Moses said it's doable. It's right here. You can do this.
You can do this, but again, it's not just you can do this and that's it. You got to take around the surrounding culture behind it. It is you can live for the law, but again, the purpose of the law is not just obtaining heaven. It's also meant to be to sanctify and separate the people of God from the people around them. That's why he gave them ceremonial laws and all this other stuff.
The purpose of the law had nothing to do with heaven at all in the Old Testament.
So that's what I'm trying to say. So when you say it's the works of the law don't count for righteousness, that's so when Moses is saying you can do this, as you're putting it, he's not saying you can live out this law perfectly and obtain heaven. He's saying you can live for the law. You can live for the Lord, and you will be blessed. You will be his people that are blessed in the land.
Well, but hold on. The reason why heaven is not.
But
Okay.
let me say this one last thing. The purpose of God blessing them isn't just for Israel. It's to show the people around Israelites what God is like. And so there's a witness in God blessing people too. It isn't just do this and I'll give you that. It isn't a quid pro quo type of thing.
I hear you. I think I wanted to make the point. The reason why heaven is not the reward for keeping the law in the Old Testament is not because heaven has some higher standard of perfectness. It's because heaven wasn't even in their purview. Their purview was the land that God is giving us. The idea of a heaven that humans could somehow be connected to is not an Old Testament reality. You don't get that until after Israel spends time in Persia, under Persian rule, or when the Greeks take the Persian ideas of heaven and hell and disseminate them through the entire region. They don't have a concept of being perfect to get to heaven. Their idea was keeping the law to keep the land. That was the only thing in their understanding. So their idea of being righteous, being perfect, for I am perfect, their idea of being righteous had everything to do with keeping the law and keeping the land. It's a New Testament idea that because they couldn't keep the law, God's going to give us a new way to please him. And because we don't seem to be able to keep the land anyway, we've got something better than earthly land. God's going to give us a spiritual land. That's a New Testament introduction to make up for the unfulfilled promises of the Old Testament.
I gotta process that a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not
All
sure
good.
I agree. Because the whole purpose of the Exodus was that so that my people were served me on this mountain. So God was very present with them. Are you saying they didn't have a concept of heaven as we in 2025 understand it?
They didn't have a concept of heaven as people in 500 BC understood it. Heaven is heaven as a kingdom or a place where people can dwell with God is a late introduction. And it's not until after the ideas of Persia are disseminated in Israel's land that you even see ideas of demons or devils or heavens or hells. That's a whole other conversation now.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking through the Psalms now, because David brought up the idea of Sheol and Hades and different things like that in the Psalms, and so I'm not 100% sure that I would agree that the Israelites had no concept of.
Well, that's a great study. I write about that, and I think chapter 14 of my book, but there's many other great works, videos on YouTube that talk about how that concept of hell was introduced to the Jews during around the time when Judaism got started. So there was ancient Israelite religion way before Judaism, and you don't find any hell before Judaism. Judaism is post the exile after they are influenced by Persia. So you might see talk of Sheol, but Sheol is very different than hell. So that's just something to check out when you get a chance.
Okay. They also mentioned Hades too. What's Hades?
They didn't mention Hades is much later. Hades is a Greek idea, and so you might see some versions of the Bible supply Hades instead of Sheol. But if you look at the Hebrew Bible, you're not going to see Hades. You're going to see Sheol, and I can double check that to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn there. But I'm quite certain you don't catch Hades in the Hebrew Bible. You only see Sheol, unless it's after the introduction of Persia. But
okay, I got some homework. Okay.
Yeah. I was going to do one more because in chapter 10, Paul does more quoting of the Old Testament. I mean, maybe we don't have to do it because it's probably going to be more of the same terrain. I was going to look at where he talks about in verse 10. Chapter 10, verses 19 and 20. He quotes Deuteronomy again, and he quotes Isaiah.
Yep.
I will make you jealous with those who are not a nation. Matter of fact, let's do it. Let's do it because I think it's worth doing.
Okay, so let me go to Romans and then Deuteronomy. Romans 10. And you say that's verse 19?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
19 and 20.
But I asked, did Israel not understand? First, Moses says, I will make you jealous of those who are not a nation. With a foolish nation, I will make you angry.
He's on that passage, he's quoting Deuteronomy 32.
Mm-hmm. 21.
In Deuteronomy, yeah. Do you know what he's talking about in Deuteronomy 32?
Let me go there.
Yep.
Because I know this is like near the end, and this is kind of Moses's song. 32, 21. I was studying.
Start at 20 if you want.
20?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry, no, 19. Just
19.
Okay. 19. Yeah.
The Lord saw it and spurned them because of the provocation of his sons and his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be. For they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faithfulness. They have made me jealous with what is no God, that they have provoked me to anger with their idols. So I will make them jealous with those who are no people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation.
All right. Is that passage saying anything like what Paul is saying? It's saying in Romans 10 that he makes his case for why the Gentiles can be grafted in to what God's doing with Israel.
So let me read that one.
Yeah, Romans 10:19. That's one we just read.
I know. We did just read that. Okay. So hold on. Yeah, I think if we scroll up, what is it saying? How beautiful is, as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news, but they have not all obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us? So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. But I ask, have they not heard? Indeed, have they? So basically, I think what in Romans 10, he's using Old Testament scenarios in the Old Testament for the Jewish listener to identify how the Jew. It's the same thing. I'm going to say the same thing. That's what I was saying. Yeah. Yeah, it's how the Gentiles will be incorporated into the family of faith, and so I think. Now I'm not 100% sure who what Deuteronomy 32 was talking about in terms of the other nation, but I do believe in Romans 10:19 he's referring to the Gentiles.
In Romans 10:19 he is referring to the Gentiles. God's going to use the Gentiles, a foreign nation, to make Israel jealous. But in Deuteronomy 32, what's happening is, and this is I'm going to add a little bit of my commentary. I think Deuteronomy 32 is written after Israel has already been exiled, after Israel has already been in a place where they feel like their God is judging them. I think Deuteronomy 32 is written to look like it was prophesied hundreds of years ago, so that they could say the same God who allowed us to get into this mess is going to get us out. It's a little more comforting when you can feel like, see, he knew we were going to end up here. Matter of fact, the only reason why we're here is because we disobeyed him. Now, you might think that's not true. You might think Deuteronomy was prophecy written in advance. But either way, here's the context. What Deuteronomy 32 is talking about is it's written as if it's hundreds of years before Israel ever ended up in captivity. Not Egypt's captivity, like Persia, Babylon, is written to look like it's hundreds of years before that. And it's saying to them, if you don't keep these laws, God's going to use people who are not his people. He's going to make you jealous by allowing them. He's going to strengthen them militarily and allow them to capture you. So whether I'm right or wrong about it being written after the fact, that's immaterial. The real point is it's written to tell Israel, if we disobey God, hundreds of years from now, guess what? He's going to use a foreign people to judge us. He's going to make us jealous by, instead of being our strength, he's going to be their strength. That's what Deuteronomy 32 is saying.
And where did you get the it's written to look like 100 years later?
So that's immaterial.
Okay.
We can go into why I think that, but that's immaterial. Like, there are a
Okay.
lot of, it's called, there's a Latin term called Vaticinium ex eventu. It means written after the fact.
Okay.
Either what you have in the Old Testament are real prophecies that were fulfilled. How did Daniel know this was going to happen? How did Isaiah know Cyrus was going to be the name of the king? How did da 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 da? Either they were real prophecies written before the fact and then fulfilled decades, sometimes centuries later, or somebody after it happened wrote it to look like it was written beforehand. Those are the only two options. Either it's real prophecy. No, there's another option. Either it's real prophecy, either somebody just made a really good guess because it came true, or it was written after the fact. That's why it came true, because the person lived it, so they knew it, but they wrote it to look like it was written beforehand so it could seem like prophecy. So it's at least one of those three things.
Okay, so the question I would have for that, and I apologize for tangenting you. That's not where you wanted to go.
It's all good. I don't mind.
Wouldn't there be some evidence in the manuscript or text? Like, wouldn't we be able to look at the papyri or whatever it was written on to say, oh, these documents aren't the same. This material isn't the same.
Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that to the degree to which we actually have manuscripts that are old enough to tell us this one came before this one, but we can't go back but so far because of the way that old parchment lasts. You can't go back but so far, but you can at least see, but this definitely is from a different time period because it's using words from a culture that it would be antedated. Like, these words are from a culture that Israel didn't have any dealings with until the 5th century. So if they're writing like it's this, when I say 5th century, I mean BCE.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing about something that happens in the 8th century BCE, but you're using words that your culture only learned in the 5th century BCE, 300 years later, then we can know, oh, you're writing it here, trying to make it look like it was back here, but you're using words that you only would have gotten from up at this point in history. So we have those kinds of things.
Sure, but I still would have to. So I'm trying to picture how that would work. Not only do you have to kind of mirror, you have to, if someone wrote Deuteronomy 32 hundreds of years later, and we somehow found the manuscript evidence of we found Deuteronomy in the dirt, then it will have to be so close in comparison by the actual material that is written on, the ink that is being used. Someone will have to write
not
hundreds
using
of years and then also put it where the other Deuteronomical text.
Deuteronomical. Yeah, I'm not going to say either. I got you.
Somebody will have to
Acetaminophen.
put
How about that?
that document, that addition in that actual document for us to think, oh, this is one.
It's not as difficult as you might think. There are all kinds of things like that in the Hebrew Bible. Like, for instance, when they slip in and they found, I won't even do that one. So here's a for instance. Like, this is sort of a tangent, but it's worth going into a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If I make not even me, let's just say you found a piece of paper on the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a piece of paper. It looks dirty, like it's been around for a while, and it's dated at the top. It's dated July 3rd, 2001. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And it says July 3rd, 2001. Here's my prediction. On September 11th of this year, 2 separate planes are going to fly into the Twin Towers in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your first thought might be, okay, you probably know that because you lived it. And then you might say, oh, but the date says July 3rd. So wait, if you wrote this before it happened, you could have actually, this might be prophetic. This might be a prediction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, you don't know that this is a prediction. You can either believe it because the date says July 3rd, or you could question and say, nah, he probably wrote that after September 11th and then put the date July 3rd just to make it look like he wrote it beforehand, right?
Mm-hmm.
But somebody says, no, I think he's really I think this person was really a prophet and really predicted it. But let's say you flip the page over and there's more writing.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the writing says, and not only that, but if I got the first prediction right, then you should trust me on this second prediction. The second prediction is Barack Obama is going to lose the 2008 election to John McCain.
Uh-huh.
Was it McCain that he ran against the first time, or was it? Yeah, I think it was McCain.
Yeah, did he run against
right?
one?
So you find that paper. It's dated July 3rd. It's got 2 predictions. The first one looks like it came true, and so you're thinking this person might be a prophet. The second one we know, but that one didn't come true. What do you think about the overall the overall document? Do you think he was prophetic and then lost his gift? Do you think maybe somebody else wrote the second part and a real prophet did write the first part and then somebody else wrote the second part? Or do you think, this is somebody who lived through September 1st and then wrote 2 predictions, one that already had come to pass, and they made it look like there was a prediction when it really wasn't. And then the other one was it was right before the election and they wanted you to think, hey, I was right about the past stuff, so trust me on this new stuff. When I talk about Barack Obama winning or losing in 2008, which would you surmise might be the case?
I mean, I could make arguments for both. He could be a genuine prophet that got it right, and then he got it wrong for one on the next one. Then he's a false prophet at that point. But it could go either way. But the point I'm making about Deuteronomy though is we don't have the original documents. We got copies of it. So to me, we would be able to compare documentation to verify what's the actual text that was written. It wouldn't just be, if it was just this one thing, then you can make that case. But we got copies of copies, and we can date manuscripts and things like that. And so if it's
not as neat as that.
It's not. No, I'm not saying it is. It's much more complex. But I'm just saying, on a general purpose, we have copies of copies that we can compare to get to the original writing. Except for
you'll never get to the original writing. You'll never get to the original writing. You'll never get to the original writing, no matter what you do.
Why do you say that?
Those are lost.
We don't have the original manuscript.
Right. So how would you ever know that you got to the original writing if you don't have the original manuscript? You have no idea of knowing what the original manuscript of anything in the Bible ever said.
Because I believe we had the original at one point. I don't think that.
Who's the we?
The world, the royal we. Big Lebowski reference. No, what I'm saying is the copies were from the original, and what lasted were the copies. The original didn't, but the copies of the original.
So how could you ever know that what you have matches? There was, like, when you say the originals, the Bible is such an amalgamation of different threads of literature. There is no such thing as an original. But even if there was, we don't have it. So how would you ever know whether or not what you have in your Bibles, like, you could never know how close or how far it is from the originals. You could never know that. It's a matter of faith to think that it is.
What did we copy if not the original?
Who knows? There's no way of knowing what we copied.
I
All the
guess.
best we could do is find the oldest available manuscripts
Uh,
and see how close or how far what we have today is from those. But you would never be able to say how close or far is it from the originals because you don't know how close or far the oldest available manuscripts are from the original. You have no way of knowing that.
so
That's just
are
a
you?
fact of life.
Just want to make sure I'm understanding you. So are you saying that it's impossible to actually date the original text of the scriptures?
You could date papyri, but you don't have any way to date something that you do not possess. And we do not possess any of the original manuscripts of the Bible.
I'm saying we once did. That's how we got copies.
When you say we once did, and you say we is the world, you got to understand, like I said, the Hebrew Bible is a compilation of various works from various times,
Right.
and there were different variations of some of the same. That's why you have doublets in the Hebrew Bible. That's why you got two different versions of um, the flood. You got two different versions of different stories about Abraham and his wife/sister. You got two different versions of because we have no way of knowing what were any of the original manuscripts. These are works that are compiled from. I'll take a strand from this. I'll take a story from this. I'll take your version of this. You've got a version of it too. Okay, I'll put those two side by side, but we don't know how close either of them were to what might have been original. On top of the fact that these are oral cultures, so you're telling the stories for generations upon generations before you ever get to writing anything down. So this is a whole long rabbit trail, but I think it's worth pointing out. You could never know. You could never date an original manuscript of the Bible because you don't know what the originals were. You don't. We had them. No, authors had different works, and other authors and compilers and editors and redactors took those works and made them into other works. And at some point, they got codified into this is going to be the book of First Kings.
So,
But you
but
have
can you
no
make
idea
that
what was the
argument?
original.
Can you make that argument about any ancient text?
Sure, you can.
So, are you
Unless you
suggesting
haven't,
that?
unless you have an autograph, and so let's say if you have an author who's got several autographs of a certain work, you can compare that and say, oh, these are this author's, and you've got contemporaries vouching that this is what he wrote. You have them corresponding with people. So some documents you wouldn't be able to make as strong a case for this isn't the original. But especially if you go back into antiquity, you don't necessarily know if you're dealing with the oldest version of something that exists.
So, hypothetically, what you're saying is, if we found the oldest version of Romans, and we read Paul, a bond servant of Christ Jesus, and that's his signature. That's what I want to deem his signature. By your logic, he could have taken another work and just wrote his name on it, and then kind of co-opted it in a sense.
Well, not only could he have done that, but
Uh,
here's what this is something that biblical scholars will tell you today. Several of the letters of Paul, you say we, in terms of the body of knowledge, we don't think that several of the letters of Paul are actually authentic. As a matter of fact, there's only 7 letters of Paul that biblical scholars think are actually authentic.
okay. Okay, this is
So, this is rabbit trail, but yeah,
yeah. Because I will question these biblical scholars and manuscript evidence, and
you're
yeah,
free to, but I mean,
that's definitely an intellectual endeavor that's gonna keep me busy for the next few days. But
yeah.
no, I get what you're saying. I disagree, but I get what you're saying.
So your brothers in the chat said that's wrong, Brady. Man, I wish I was on the convo. I check your DMs on Facebook. I DM'd you, I think, about a month ago, asking you if you were free on certain dates. But
Your mic is
yeah, let's
starting to
do it.
mess up.
Let's. Okay, thank you.
What up, Anthony? Say what's up to the bro.
1 2 1 2. Is it better now?
Yep, good to go.
Okay. So in case Anthony didn't hear me, Anthony Twyman, I sent you a DM on Facebook, inviting you onto the podcast. Let's get it, yo. I was going to spend some time going through a different passage with you.
Okay.
We didn't get a chance to do.
Mark 13 and 20, Matthew 24.
Yeah. But it's already been over an hour. I want to give you a chance to, if you have any questions for me, as opposed to me trying to get you to speak to your worldview and your faith, I wanted to give you a chance to steer for a bit.
Yeah. So, well, one, I always want to talk about my worldview because that's the responsibility. Love to preach the gospel on Ichabod. Uh, no, but my questions. So I get your thoughts on scripture and kind of you believe that it's kind of an unreliable document, and now I'm hearing that it's kind of false in some senses, um, and when I saw the subject of our talk today, it made me wonder what do you think? What's your what? How do you see Jesus?
um, if Jesus lived, and I don't know that he did, I would fall on the side that Jesus is a historical person, but we really don't know. The same thing you said, like you could say the same thing about other historical documents. Yes, the same thing I would say about Jesus, I would say about anybody from history, unless they left photographic, um, archaeological, literary evidence, or their contemporaries were willing to document it, and their contemporaries don't have a bias towards them. So we have works from people in history who were enemies of somebody. Like your enemy's not going to praise you. Your enemy's not going to, like, there's certain things that we do. This gets into historiography.
Yeah.
Historiography is not just history, but how do you do history? What makes you say this is more or less reliable? So when it comes to Jesus, I think there's enough. I think the literature about Jesus is late enough to question whether or not he was real, but voluminous enough to think he might have been. So if he really did exist, then I see Jesus as a failed apocalyptic prophet.
I see.
I think he came on the scene and it began to look like he was what Israel was looking for. And I think he really did talk of kingdom here on this earth. But I think he was killed for his crimes against the state. And I think his legend grew upon his death. But at some point, they needed to spiritualize all of the kingdom talk because it wasn't coming to fruition, which is why I wish we would have been able to get into Mark 13 and Matthew 24, because I think you see some of that there. You see people trying to, I think you see this all throughout the New Testament. You see people like the author of Second Peter, who most likely was not Peter. But I see you smiling like, really? But you see people all throughout the Old Testament doing things to explain why it's not happening. You said it would happen during our lifetime. You said the days were short. You said this. You said we shouldn't even get married. You said all these things, and yet people are falling asleep, dying. People are dying. And I think you see the authors trying to do things to make up for why it's not happening. And so I think Jesus was a failed apocalyptic prophet. And I think his followers began to try to explain away why the kingdom can be a spiritual one and not the material one that we were looking for, because that material one obviously is not going to happen.
Okay. And when you were a Christian, did you have a particular stance on Mark 13?
I didn't. As a Christian, I'm going to be honest with you. This might be the first time I'm ever saying this. Maybe I think I said it once or twice before. I think I had a very, I don't want to offend you, but I think I had a like really bitch boy stance as a Christian. Like I ran from those passages because I didn't like the um who are the folks that say that it was fulfilled spiritually, the preterist. I didn't like
Preterist.
the partial preterist, the full preterist. I thought that was completely bonkers.
Mm. So
But I
you're a
didn't know
futurist.
how. I was a futurist, but I didn't know how to make sense of Jesus telling them,
Mm.
this generation will not pass away. All the explanations I ever heard for were unsatisfactory to me. And so I utilized Paul at that point,
Mm.
right? We know in part.
Ah.
We see dimly as through a glass. I don't know how Jesus said that and it didn't happen, but I think I ran from it as opposed to actually dealing with it. Had I been forced to deal with it, I probably would not have been, I don't know if I would have lost my faith. I probably would not have been as vocal with my faith because that's to me one of the hardest passages for a Christian to deal with.
And do you just I'm not going to dig deep into it because I want to get back to how you see Jesus, but um, do you see Mark 13 or Matthew 24 as the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in any way?
I think the setup for that is the Jerusalem temple, which is why I side with the scholars who believe that Mark, which is the first one to write about Jesus saying these things,
Mm.
um, that Mark had to have been written after AD 70. Because, like I said about 9/11 versus Obama losing the first election, if you get some things in your prophecy right, but then you don't get the other stuff right, either you were a prophet and you lost the gift, either you made a very good guess the first time, but then not the second time, or you lived through the first thing and then you used the fact that you lived through the first thing to make it look like you were writing prophetically when you wrote about it. And so you predate it. You date it as if you wrote before. So if I'm Mark, I'm going to make it look like I'm writing in 40 AD, when really I'm writing after 70 AD. So I saw the temple get destroyed. I saw it, but I'm going to make it look like I'm writing beforehand. So I look prophetic. But here's what happens. Later generations come and they say, yo, look, Mark saw that the temple was going to be destroyed decades before it happened. He was prophetic, or Jesus was prophetic because Jesus told them decades before. But what that doesn't explain is, okay, how come you got that right, but then nothing else you said was going to happen happened?
Well,
Only.
what about, so two things. One,
Mhm.
um, I would be surprised if Mark would have lived in a Jewish community and made up stuff the way you're saying it, and not been killed for blasphemy and things like that. Um, have you considered kind of a dual prophecy of Jesus simultaneously talking about the destruction of the temple and also end times? And so it's more of a partially, yes, some things were fulfilled, but partially we're looking to other fulfillments of that.
I don't know how I can get there because what the author was bold enough to write was,
Mm-hmm.
this generation shall not pass away until all these things take
Mm-hmm.
place. And
Right.
the conversation starts off with Jesus is leaving the temple, and they say to him, Master, you see this building, you see these great stones, like, and Jesus says, guess what? They're going to be, not one stone's going to be left standing upon the other. And then and they said, well, hey, tell us, when is this going to happen?
Right.
You want to know? Well, when you see this, you see, and he's telling them, when you see this. He's not talking to, I don't know if you saw the AI things that people are creating where they have basically first century Jesus talking to his disciples saying, hey, when you see these things, da, 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 know that, the time is short. And the disciples get worried. He's, oh, don't worry. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Greg in Ohio. And they're like, Greg in Ohio? What's Ohio? Don't even worry. Like, basically, why am I saying all these things to you, my 12 disciples, if it's not going to be fulfilled until Greg in Ohio's time? But I'm saying to you, to my disciples who asked me, tell us, when are these things going to happen?
Because I think he's doing the same thing that he does when he says things like, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. Of course, he's addressing an issue right then and there to the audience that's listening, but he's also simultaneously speaking of a future occurrence. Now, and Mark,
well, no, because the Bible disagrees with you right there.
Mm-hmm.
The New Testament authors say they thought he was talking about destroying the temple, but he was really talking about himself. He wasn't doing some dual thing when he talked about destroy this temple.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different passage. And
right,
the
no,
author says Jesus was not. The author says Jesus wasn't doing a dual thing. Jesus was talking about himself in that passage, not the temple.
Right. Well, the point I'm trying to make is it possible that Jesus is, and talking about and responding to his disciples and talking to about the temple being destroyed, also talks about the end times as well? Could he be talking about both things at the same time? Or you think it's just about the end times?
I don't know how he's talking about I think he is talking about the end times.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem was they thought those were the end times. So I don't think he's talking about his time and some future end time. I think he's telling them that their time was the end time and he was wrong.
Okay. Okay. So, but then we get to the rest of Mark where he couldn't mean in Mark 13 that this is the end time now. Never mind. What am I trying to say? The abomination of desolation, right? Now help me out.
Let the reader. I'm sorry, real quick. It's important, whatever you're going to say about this, keep in mind, he says, let the reader understand. Meaning there's something that people who are reading it in the time when it's being written that they should understand about that passage.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So it's very time locked, right?
I wouldn't say it's time locked.
Okay. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Because I don't know what reader he's referring to. It could be readers then. It could be referring to us now. I don't know.
So the author of Mark and Matthew, when they write these things, I don't think, as a Christian, I would think it, but I don't think now, that they had in mind somebody 2,000 years in the future. When he says, let the reader read and understand, he's drawing on two different things. He's drawing on a prophecy from Daniel, but he's tying the prophecy from Daniel into something that happened in their lifetime. And he's trying to say, hey, this thing that happened in our lifetime is the fulfillment of that prophecy in Daniel. So that's how we know the end of the age has come upon us.
I hear what you're saying. I think when he begins to talk about the abomination of desolation, that it's temple specific. I don't think it is necessarily end time specific. Let me pause right there because I think what I wanted to get to though is your view of Jesus. If Jesus was just a failed prophet, why do you think that the Jews would choose him as the centerpiece of their not the Jews but Christians? Why would you think Christians would choose Jesus as the centerpiece when he was killed and then publicly embarrassed and all these types of things. And not to mention that he was also a failed prophet. He was also a liar. He was also all these other things.
Well, human history and human nature is bizarre enough that people do all kinds of things when their expectations are not fulfilled. QAnon is still a thing because of this. There are people who still think uh, RFK Jr. is going to pop out somewhere and show that he wasn't really dead all this time, and um, Trump
Right, but
didn't lose the election. And
those are kind of like nuanced, cult like, designations. Christianity is an enduring religion that
Mhm.
millions, if not billions, have followed. And
Mhm.
if Jesus was this person, you don't think that the thinkers of every time since Jesus would have said, "Nah, let's choose somebody else."
Um, it depends. It depends on how the cult began. Depends on what the cult of personality is like upon the death of its leader, and how people respond. There were other would-be messiahs who were killed, and they had cults and people who would say, this person is still going to do the thing that we wanted this person to do. One of the things that's very interesting to me about Judaism, excuse me, or about Israelite religion, period. It always happened with Israel that their religion ended up looking like the the religions of the dominant people around them. So when they were under Mesopotamian rule, or
Mm-hmm.
when Mesopotamia was the largest nation around them, Israelite gods with an S, plural, looked like Canaanite gods, looked like Hittite gods, looked like Babylon gods. Matter of fact, the stories of Israel's gods were their stories in some cases. If you read Epic of Gilgamesh, if you read the Adapa and the Food of Life, if you read Enuma Elish, you see how Israelites' stories about their God are ripped from the headlines of all these other gods. And Israelites' God or gods ends up taking on the nicknames of these other gods. He's riding on the clouds like Baal. He's the mighty breasted one like El. All these ideas about Israel's God, you get them from the gods around Israel at that time. But then when Israel goes into captivity to other nations, now they end up taking things from these religions. Oh, now you've got a Holy Spirit. Oh, you didn't have that before you were under Persian rule. Now you've got a hell and a devil. But now when you're under Greco-Roman rule, what do their gods do? Their gods sleep with human women and have demigods, half God and half human children. Well, guess what happens to Israel when they're under Greco-Roman rule? Well, now their God's got a baby mama. And now their God's got a half God, half human son. And so I say all that to say, one of the things that you see in the Greco-Roman gods is their gods have what's called an apotheosis, which is after death, you have this ascension into the heavens and you're deified. That was common, not just of the demigods, that was common of Caesars, of several of the Caesars, who after they die, you have these appearances of them after death and they ascend and they're with the gods. And so I'm saying all that to say, I think it's not, well, I think it's feasible that what you see in Israelite religion in the first and second century is their version of the religions around them. It's very syncretistic. And I think Christianity makes much more sense as syncretism. It's Judaism syncretized with Greco-Roman religion.
Mm. And so okay, so you you pretty much look at Christianity, if I could summarize what you're saying, as kind of a piecemealing of whatever they were exposed to during their captivity, and what they
That's the
had known
trend.
about, huh?
That's the trend. Go
And
all the way back to ancient Israel.
what they had known about God was kind of done away with.
Well, I wouldn't say done away with. See, in Christianity, I would have called it progressive revelation. God was always going to show that he was a Trinity and he was da 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 da. He just, milled it out piece by piece. Now I don't call it progressive revelation. I wouldn't say that the old versions of God are done away with. I would say it's the evolution of religion.
Of the Israelite religion.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I will have to. I wish I could. I wish we had more time to dig into that.
Yeah.
I would want to figure out how you make the links, and then
Somebody just put this in the chat real quick to what you're saying. Zoroastrianism, right? I don't know if you've ever studied Zoroastrianism. This is the religion of
very little bit.
Religion of Persia. So when you see how much Judaism got from Zoroastrianism, you'll understand Christianity in an entire new light. I promise you.
Yeah. So I struggle with you seem to imply correlation means causation, and there's a correlation between this and that. So that means they took it from this and they took it from that. But if the Old Testament is a recounting of creation itself, wouldn't the Bible be the first story? Wouldn't every subsequent religion copy from us? Because our religion and our Bible is anchored in the beginning itself.
No, not at all.
So if it was just writings, then then you can say, oh, well, this writing is older than this writing, and then you can make that case. But as you mentioned before, this was an oral tradition before it was written. So was the oral tradition somehow? Does the oral tradition predate the Epic of Gilgamesh, or does the Epic of Gilgamesh predate the oration?
Very hard to make that case, because even in the Israelites' retelling of their story, they're getting words and ideas that are not Hebrew concepts. They're getting them from nations that were older than Israel. Like these nations have archaeological attestation that predate Israel by centuries and centuries, if not millennia. And so it's very difficult to say that these older, ancient, so think about this. Oral tradition comes before written tradition, right? If written tradition is late, what you're saying can't really be the case, because these cultures' written tradition predates Israel before Israel could even have an oral tradition. These other places' written tradition predates even the birth of an Israel.
So before
this
predates Jacob.
Well, the Jacob story might not be an original Israelite story. They may have gotten that from other people, but so here's the deal. So if you look at Genesis, I say this often on here, and I'm not saying this to sell a book. I'll send you a free copy if you want. I think you really should read chapters 7 through 9 of my book, because I go into how these other ancient myths predate the Bible and have more complete stories than the Bible. And you can see how the Bible is riffing off of this one and this one and that one. And this is something that's known even to Christian Old Testament scholars, which is why I write about this in the book. The people that I was reading, the Christian, conservative, evangelical Old Testament scholars that I was reading when I was in Bible college, they've had to change their views because they realize how much ancient Mesopotamian literature influenced what ended up being in the Hebrew Bible. It was not the other way around.
So take the children of Israel in Egypt, right? Egypt had and that in that time when a nation was conquered, their gods were also conquered, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why when the plagues of Egypt happened, they happened according to the Egyptian god, and God shows his dominance over all of the Egyptian gods. And so this is why I keep saying, like, when God, and then they get to the wilderness and build a golden calf, so it shows that they have some influence from Egypt still, but then God destroys that, right? Or Dagon, God cuts Dagon in half and makes him bow before the ark, right? God has always in the Old Testament shown his dominance over the gods of the Philistines or the gods of the Egyptians and so forth, like that. If what you're saying is true, that Israelites borrowed from these people when they were out of captivity, wouldn't their God then dominate whatever that was and kind of obliterate that? If it was just all made up stories.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
All right.
If they
So
had to be, you're saying,
your
are you
premise
saying if
is
they had the ability to write their God any way that they wanted, why wouldn't they write their God as victorious over? Is that what you're saying?
no. What you seem to imply that these Exodus and different things were just made up based on who was
Mm-hmm.
around them, right? So if I took your stance and say Exodus was made up and they were just writing. If that was the case, and we read
Mm-hmm.
Exodus where we see plagues destroying the Egyptian gods, so that meant some author who was writing the Exodus is showing the God of the Israelites more powerful than the Egyptian gods, or the author is writing how the God of Israel is more powerful than the Philistine God. Then why wouldn't they do the same once they're out of captivity with all these other influences that you're saying? Why wouldn't that trend continue?
Oh, so why didn't they do that to the Romans? You're saying
To the Romans or to whoever you're
to the
saying,
Greeks?
the Mesopotamians, whoever you think they borrowed from, why wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
they write their God more dominant than those people?
Well, because you got to think about the trajectory of history. It's one thing to write that your God is more powerful, or many scholars, and this is worth checking out, say that the God El Elyon
Mm-hmm.
was not always synonymous with Yahweh, but Yahweh co-opted El's position and took over as the head God. You can see that in things like Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9. You can see some of that there, where El and Yahweh were two different gods. And El gave Yahweh an inheritance, and Israel was was El's, sorry, Israel was Yahweh's inheritance from El. You can see parts of that, and I think Psalm 82, where the Most High judges among the Elohim, the sons of God.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you have this progression in the Hebrew Bible of writing their God in a victorious way, right? But there's certain things you can't write. So I thought about this while you were talking. If Israel's God really was who they said, why free Israel to go take the land of the Canaanites? Why free Israel to go take all these? Why not take the land of Israel, of Egypt? Like, if Israel's God is really as strong as you're saying, and you're really judging the gods of Egypt by these different plagues, I'm going to black out the sun, I'm going to do this to the now. If your God really is that strong, why have them leave Egypt and go conquer some other people? Why not just conquer Egypt? Well, you know why? Because you can't change history. All you can do is try to write a story that's as unfact checkable as possible. Because if it's fact checkable, people can call BS on it. So I can't write that Israel took over Egypt. Why? Because that never happened. But I could say that Israel left Egypt and went to these other places out here that we see these ruined lands. We could say that our God took those people's lands. We could say that, and nobody can really say they have it because maybe they weren't they weren't there at the time. But here's the deal. You get further in history and you write these prophecies that your God's going to put you back in charge. Your God's going to make you the head and not the tail. Your God's going to make you the lender and not the borrower. You say all these things, but now here comes Persia. Now here comes Greece. Now here comes Rome. Now, so you really can't keep writing your God is victorious if you keep taking all these L's. So, you've heard the saying, if you can't beat them, join them. Rather than trying to make our God taking over all these peoples and all these lands, what we're going to do is we're going to engage in syncretism. We're going to make our gods look not so different than their gods. As a matter of fact, what Israel began to do is not just say our God beat those people's gods. That wasn't what Israel did. What Israel did was they would say the reason why we lost was because our God gave us over to those gods. Because their story was we keep ending up in captivity. We keep ending up oppressed. So we've got to find a way to explain why our God's not winning. Okay, you know what we'll do? Can't blame our God. It's our fault. It's because we can't please him, and let's give ourselves a law and say we kept breaking the law, and that's why our God's not showing up for us. It's a post hoc rationalization for why we can't win. That's what this history.
Okay, so this is all kind of retroactive, trying to saving face.
So here's the thing. I would want to dive right in and just say yes, but here's what I would rather answer it this way. It's either that or all of it is true, and God is just taking an extremely long time to fulfill the dual prophecy, the one he made to Israel and the one that he made to the Gentiles.
Okay. And
one of these two explains what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think so. I'll give you my point of view. Because you're saying a lot, and I would definitely love to see how you support that over time. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a far reach to say that they kind of wrote all this to save face and make to try to for future generations to see them in a particular light, when the main point of the scriptures is to highlight the person of Jesus that voluntarily laid down his life. And so that's not even
post hoc rationalization.
Huh?
Our would-be savior died. How are we going to explain it? We're going to make it that was the mission. He had to die.
Okay,
and then you go back to Old Testament passages and you shoehorn Jesus into them, like Isaiah 53.
And you think Isaiah? Okay, no.
That's a whole other conversation. Yes.
Yeah.
Isaiah 53 is definitely not about Jesus, but you shoehorn him into it.
I see. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But you see in later scriptures where Jesus is triumphant. So he's no longer the suffering servant. He's coming with all power in his hands. So as you see that as Israel trying to create hope of some sort, or what?
Isaiah 42 is chock full of these kind of statements where God says to Israel through the prophet, I'm the God who prophesied the former things. And if the former things came to pass, then you can know that I'm going to do these future things. Now you're going to sing a new song because the same God who did X, Y, and Z is going to do na. Mm-hmm. Now, the former things, you have to ask yourself, did God really prophesy the former things? Or is this somebody who saw the things happen and is going to make it look like God is strong enough to have foretold us that? And if he can have foretold us that, then we can trust these new prophecies where we see God getting us out of our trouble. I think it is all the reason why the person making the prediction about 9/11 on that paper got it right. He saw that part happen. And he's writing it to make it look like it was July 3rd. when really he wrote it after the fact. But the reason why you know he did that is because he didn't get the other stuff right. And if you look at Isaiah, Isaiah things to the day. He names Cyrus by name. It's like, yo, how did you get that right? And then you look at the rest of Isaiah, you're like, yo, but you said this was going to happen too. You ain't get that part right. And that shows you, oh, okay. So you actually lived through, the author of Second Isaiah lived through the captivity with Cyrus. He lived through that. So he was able to make it look like prophecy and get that right. But the reason why the rest of the book doesn't come to pass is because he was not a prophet. He was someone trying to give Israel at that time hope. That's what apocalyptic literature always does. Matter of fact, you'll find a few Christians who will actually tell you this. Revelation is apocalyptic literature. It's not about the future. It was about giving people at that time comfort for what they were going through.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with that. I think Revelation was useful to the original audience.
Do you think that there's a man of sin or a beast whose number is 666 that's going to come in the future, or do you think it was about somebody alive at that time?
Both. I think there are multiple beasts. I think there's multiple entities. I think there's multiple kingdoms that are set up against God.
But here's the deal. Do you think the number 666 is going to apply to a future person, or do you think it only applied to somebody at the time of the writing? Because the writer says, let the reader read and understand, which means he expects his readers to know who he's talking about. Then,
yes.
Do you think there's going to be somebody in the future that 666 also applies to?
I think it's both. I think Revelation, because that's how Revelation opens. Revelation opens saying, let the words of this prophecy be read aloud, and so forth and so forth. So I think it's for all people, for all times. And so I think when you think through Nero and the Emperor Domitian, I think 666 applies there. I think 666 will apply in the future. I think the mark of the beast applied then, and I think it applied in the future. I think kingdoms that are with 7 horns and all these things are set up. I think it applied then. I think it applies then. I think Christ being in the center, with famous, the Hebrew Israelites abused Revelation 1:14. But I think Revelation 1:14 talks about Jesus in the midst of his church, standing in judgment, seeing everything that we do. I think that existed then. I think it existed now. I think Christ still stands in all what has all power and authority. I think he will come back again, just as the way he left it. So I think Revelation is applicable all across.
Last question for you then.
Yes, sir.
The rapture that was supposed to happen last week, they just switched it and said, oh no, that was Jesus was on a different calendar. And so it's going to happen now, October 6th and 7th. 6-7, young people would shout out 6-7 right there. But it's going to happen October 6th through 7th. Do you think that the person who said the rapture is going to return, do you think that person's a false prophet?
Yes.
Why? Because
he prophesied something that didn't come true.
Well, now he's changing and saying it's going to happen October 6th, 7th.
You don't get to change it. If God told you this is going to happen, and you say, hey, God told me this is happening, and it don't happen, you're a liar. You're a false prophet. And so I think, yes, sir.
Why do you not apply that same standard to Jesus telling his disciples, all these things that I just told you, this generation is not going to pass away until all these things come to pass? Why do you not apply that same standard to Jesus?
Because I think when he said these things will happen, I do believe that it's a duality there. I think he is talking about the temple being destroyed, and his disciples were alive during the destruction of the temple. But I also think that he's also talking about the end times, and we will see these signs come before the end times. And so I think there's a duality there. I don't think he's talking about one thing or the other.
He tells them you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven in power and great glory. He includes that in the all these things. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. They passed away. They didn't see that. So whatever the dual fulfillment part of it is, they didn't see that. And he told them that they would. Doesn't that make him a false prophet?
No, I don't think he was. I think he was talking to them in terms of the temple. I think as we read it, he's talking to us in terms of the end times. I don't think I don't think he is telling them that you're going to see the end times come. That wouldn't even make sense, because again, there's other chapters after Mark 14, where if Jesus knew he was going to die, Jesus chose when he was going to die. He chose how he was going to die. It was prophesied how he was going to die.
It was prophesied how he was going to die?
Yeah, he would be beaten. They would gamble for his clothes.
So let's do this again. Maybe we can get your brother on this one. Let's do this again, where we go through the prophecies about Jesus and his death, and we try to see whether or not I'm almost a little scared, because I got a feeling you're going to say it's a dual fulfillment thing. But let's try to do that again, because maybe when I bring your brother on, we can all talk about the prophecies.
My brother, when you invite him on, I think if you talk about evolution, I think that would be a way more productive conversation.
You and I never talked about evolution?
You and I did, but I'm saying my brother is really.
We did?
We talked for a little bit, like for 20 minutes. I'm saying my brother's really sound in his approach to evolution. Just a heads up.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, let's get back on that. And if you can you send me the support for the stuff you were saying in terms of like people were co-opting stuff here and there. We kind of wrote the scriptures and kind of looking back to save face, like all that stuff. If you got a reference, I would love to see that.
The best thing I could try to send you some things. The best thing I would do, I would tell you once again, the chapters 6 through, I will go as far as 11 of my book. Will give you some resources and some ideas to consider there. But I'll dig up some sources for you as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try to find. I do have your book still, and if you did go through some of them, you kind of named the guy. I didn't necessarily see the book, but I'll look again.
Okay, I'll direct you to where in the book talks specifically about those things, and then I'll get you some other sources to check out as well. Appreciate it. Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Hey man. Hey, thank you for your time and for putting up with my incessant questions.
All good, bro.
Any super chats in here? Let me scroll up real quick. I haven't been looking at the chat. I don't see any supers. I'm almost at the top. So that being the case, I don't think there's going to be an exit strategy this Thursday. Like I said, I got to give 2 talks tomorrow, and I'm trying to preserve my voice. I'm not back to 100%. So, but yeah, I'll be talking with you and try to get your brother in here soon as well. So thanks again, man.
Appreciate it, man. God bless you.
All right, folks. Y'all have a good night out there. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
Peace.